There's something called the Xander Zayas paradox, and it is something that I've not seen for some time. I can't even think about when I've seen it before. And the Xander Zayas paradox is when you're a unified champion in a really exciting division, and you arguably have the most accolades of anyone, and yet two other fighters, possibly three, stand out more than you, you know. And I think that's the case. So we're going to go through it. On this evening, he beat Abbas Barayu. They used to spar. Barayu is a really good brawler, pressure fighter. You could see the influence. They talked on the broadcast about he had trained with Arthur Abraham. He really fights like Arthur Abraham, where he gets into a pattern of just following you around. And unless he's really, really comfortable, he is not going to throw punches. And Zayas really took advantage of that. He was able to box beautifully for at least the first 5 or 6 rounds. The judges had it 116, 112, which felt a little close. One judge saw a different fight than I saw, which was 116, 112 for Barao, which is kind of weird. I didn't see how that was a thing. But the big takeaway now is Zayas holds the WBA and the WBO junior middleweight title. And yet, I think most people are looking at Vergil Ortiz, who hasn't won a world title, and Jaron Boots Ennis as the best guys in the division, and quite possibly Sebastian Fundora, who, I'll hold the phone, but I will respect that he's picked up some good wins recently. They're looking at those guys more so as the best fighters in the division. And I think that that's kind of interesting, right? Because here's Zayas, he's won these fights, and I think you really have to look at kind of the misfortune he had. And that, Charles Conwell was a fight away, and Charles Conwell is a really exceptional fighter. And then he loses to an unheralded fighter. And when he loses to that fighter, now Zayas fights someone that people don't really know, a brawler, a volume puncher for the WBO title. So even though this fighter had beaten the Olympian Charles Conwell, it goes unnoticed because that was an undercard bout and people didn't watch it. And now he's fighting someone who people don't really view as an elite level boxer, but he got an elite level win. Then we follow that up with, here's Yoenis Tellez. Tellez is a really, really good fighter, promising Cuban. If Zayas beat him, I think most people go, okay, he's right up there at the top. Abbas Barayu upsets Tellez. So now here comes Barao. Barao enters the contest for this fight against Zayas. They had sparred. A bunch of people say, oh, this is a real fight. And then Zayas makes it look fairly easy for most of the first half of the fight. And now the interest level. I think the thing with Zayas is he's kind of like Puerto Rico's modern version of Ivan Calderon. He's a technical master. He's not going to ever be that Tito Trinidad-like fighter. But he's a solid fighter who always comes in shape, and he really wants to be the face of Puerto Rican boxing. He really wants to take on the burden of being the fighter for his people. You see that when he's trying to go to that stage where he speaks in Spanish first in interviews, which I think is an ode to the people of Puerto Rico, that I talk to my people first. But I think the downside is he truly hasn't fought one of those top guys yet, and he's a unified belt holder. And it's like when you fight a Boots and you fight a Vergil Ortiz, that's when we find out a lot, right? There's been a level of comfort. The fighter that he fought that beat Conwell was a good pressure fighter, but extremely limited. Barao, to a certain extent, really, really elite level fighter, but he had sparred him. He kind of knew what it was. Now I'm curious how he handles one of those two top guys, Jaron Ennis or Vergil Ortiz, who passed the eye test, and who knows, even Devin Haney's a pretty big guy. Devin Haney might be coming to that division at a certain time, and that would be an interesting fight. But with Xander Zayas, he's starting to get to that point that I think that his team always envisioned, Puerto Rican superstar. But it's not happening as fluidly because it's like the performances aren't quite those performances that just create a star. Everything around him is that of a star. He talks the part, he trains the part, he's got a professional team, great coach. But there's something just void currently. And it's either time, right? Because the one thing that people never bring up now was 23, turned pro at 16. Really, we wouldn't typically be talking about him in this position unless he was 26 or 27 and a traditional prospect. So part of the issue is he might just be a little young and overachieving at a young age, which is incredible. But he's in a paradoxical position because I think that like a lot of people, even though he's a 2-belt champion, look at Boots or look at Vergil Ortiz and say that's the number one guy in the division. And I don't even think they hold a conversation unless they're a contrarian that Xander's in that conversation.